Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story is a chilling account from Reddit user DryMarionberry5283. It's packed with eerie moments and unsettling encounters that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure you're comfortable and ready for a spine-tingling experience as we dive into the cabin's shadow. When I was around 12 years old, my family and I moved into a cabin on about 5 acres of land. The property had been vacant for several years, its previous occupants leaving behind a crumbling structure that needed extensive repairs. My parents, ever the optimists, saw it as a project, a chance for a fresh start. The cabin, though run down, held a certain charm that I could see even then. The land was lush, surrounded by dense forest and wildlife. My siblings and I were excited about the prospect of exploring the outdoors despite the cabin's dilapidated state. We spent weekends cleaning up the yard, fixing broken windows, and sanding down creaky floors. It was hard work, but there was something gratifying about transforming the space into a home. The wide open spaces and the freedom to roam made it a paradise for us kids. At first, the cabin seemed like a dream come true. The large windows let in streams of sunlight, and the sprawling grounds offered endless possibilities for adventure. But as time went on, an undercurrent of unease began to settle in. It started with minor things, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, a sense of being watched. The first few times I saw the figure, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. I'd be sitting on the couch, absorbed in a book or TV show, when I'd catch a glimpse of something dark and thin darting down the hallway. It was always peripheral, never directly in my line of sight. Each time I turned to look, the figure would vanish. The more I saw it, the more I felt like something sinister was lurking in the shadows, just beyond my vision. One evening, after a particularly long day of repairs, I decided to watch a movie and fall asleep on the couch. My parents were out for a quick errand, and the house was quiet. I curled up under a blanket and soon drifted off. I woke in the middle of the night with an intense feeling of dread. The room was dark, and I could hear muffled voices coming from the next room. It sounded like my parents were engaged in a whispered conversation, but their voices were distant and unintelligible. As I lay there, trying to shake off the fear, I heard something that made my blood run cold, a growl, low and menacing, coming from the kitchen. It wasn't just any growl, it was a guttural, threatening sound that seemed to say my name. The growl was accompanied by a voice that was raspy, deep, and filled with malice. I could almost feel the vibrations of the sound in my chest. My body was paralyzed with fear, and I struggled to breathe. I tried to rationalize what I'd heard. Maybe it was the house settling, or perhaps an animal had gotten inside. But the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was wrong. My parents' voices were now silent, adding to the eerie stillness that pervaded the cabin. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that sleep would come quickly and whisk me away from this nightmare. The fear made it difficult to sleep, but eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted off. The next morning, I recounted my experience to my parents. They listened with concern and decided that the best course of action was to bless the house and drive out any negative presence. We went through each room, anointing the doors with oil and burning sage to cleanse the space. My parents believed this would help, and for a while it seemed like it worked. The figure's appearances became less frequent, and the atmosphere in the house felt lighter. Despite the temporary reprieve, the shadowy figure was never entirely gone. Over the years, its presence continued to lurk at the edges of my perception. I tried to convince myself that it was just a figment of my imagination, but the fear never entirely dissipated. As I grew older, the sightings became less frequent, but the fear remained a constant companion. One particularly unsettling encounter happened a few months after the initial incident. I was alone in the cabin, my parents having gone out for a brief errand. I had been reading a book in the living room, enjoying the solitude. The cabin was unusually quiet. The only sounds were the creaks and groans of the old building. The silence was almost oppressive, making every little noise seem amplified. I decided to watch some TV to pass the time. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of the screen. As I settled in, I felt a familiar sensation, as if I were being watched. My skin prickled with anxiety, and I tried to focus on the TV, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I glanced around the room, half expecting to see the shadowy figure appear. The sensation grew stronger, and I started to notice the figure again. This time, it seemed to move closer. My heart raced, and I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into darkness. The silence was deafening, and every creak of the floorboards seemed magnified. I fumbled for the light switch, but the darkness was relentless. When the light finally flickered on, the figure was gone. I scanned the room, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. My pulse was still racing, and I felt a wave of relief mixed with lingering unease. That night, I struggled to sleep. The cabin seemed to come alive with unsettling noises. Every groan of the floorboards and creak of the old beams was amplified, making it difficult to relax. I kept the lights on, but the fear still clung to me. Sleep eventually came, but it was fitful and filled with nightmares. A few months later, another disturbing event occurred. I was alone again, and the cabin felt strangely quiet. I was in my room, reading, when I heard a faint scratching noise coming from the attic. The noise was sporadic but persistent, as if someone or something was trying to get down. My curiosity and fear wrestled within me, and I decided to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly made my way to the attic. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight, and the old door to the attic groaned as I pushed it open. The attic was filled with old furniture covered in sheets and dusty boxes. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and age. The scratching noise had stopped by the time I reached the attic. I shone the flashlight around the room, revealing the cluttered space. My eyes were drawn to a dark shape in the corner, partially obscured by a stack of old boxes. My heart pounded as I approached it. The shape seemed to move slightly, as if it were breathing. I moved the boxes aside, revealing a large old mirror covered in a dusty cloth. I pulled the cloth away, and the mirror's surface reflected a distorted version of the attic. The edges of the mirror seemed to warp and bend, creating an unsettling effect. I noticed something in the reflection, a dark, thin figure standing behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I ran back downstairs, my heart racing. I locked the attic door and vowed never to go back up there alone. The mirror remained covered, a constant reminder of the unsettling encounter. The fear continued to haunt me, and I tried to avoid thinking about it. Years passed, and the experiences with the shadowy figure became less frequent. I learned to live with the lingering unease, accepting it as a part of my life. My family eventually moved out of the cabin, seeking a fresh start elsewhere. I haven't been back since, and the memories of that place still haunt me. There were other incidents, moments when the cabin's eerie atmosphere seemed to close in around me. I remember a particularly unnerving evening when I was home alone. I was sitting in the living room, reading a book, when I heard the distinct sound of footsteps in the hallway. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, as if someone was walking just outside my door. I held my breath, listening intently. The footsteps stopped outside my room, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I quietly got up and checked the hallway, but there was no one there. The silence was oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I locked the door and tried to calm myself, but the fear remained. Another time, while exploring the property, I found a strange old journal buried beneath a pile of leaves. The journal was filled with handwritten notes and sketches, detailing strange occurrences and sightings of a dark figure. The entries were dated back to when the cabin was first built. The journal spoke of unsettling experiences, similar to mine. It mentioned the figure as if it were a known entity, something that had been haunting the cabin for years. The journal's discovery only added to my unease. I wondered if the figure had always been there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for someone to notice. My family's attempts to cleanse the house seemed to have offered only temporary relief. The dark presence remained, an ever-present reminder of something that couldn't be fully explained. As time went on, I came to terms with the cabin's unsettling history. I tried to rationalize the experiences, but the fear and anxiety never fully went away. The memories of that place remain vivid, a constant reminder of the dark figure that haunted my childhood. Years later, I learned some troubling truths about my father's actions during our time in the cabin. He is no longer part of my life, and I won't go into the details, but I believe his behavior attracted negative forces to our home. His actions seemed to draw something dark and malevolent into our lives, and despite our attempts to cleanse the house, I'm not sure it was ever truly rid of the presence. The cabin, with its shadowy figure and eerie atmosphere, became a part of my past, a place I can't fully forget no matter how much I try. The experiences I had there shaped my perception of fear and the unknown. I've since moved on, but the memories of the cabin's shadow linger, a haunting reminder of something that will always be a part of me. Thanks for joining me for tonight's spine-chilling tale, The Cabin's Shadow. A big shout out to Reddit user DryMarionberry5283 for sharing this eerie account with us. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future content.